Maya stood in front of the fridge and finally broke down. No job security, no help, just a spiral notebook and a choice. She saved $5 a week, tracked every cent, and built her way back, one envelope at a time. Maya didn't wait for rescue. She rescued herself. Watch how she turned $42 into peace of mind. The dishes in the sink had been there for 3 days. Not because Maya was lazy, but because she didn't have the energy to face them. When you're broke, even small things become symbols. That pile of dishes, it wasn't just mess. It was pressure, shame, a reminder that she couldn't even keep up with the basics. At 26, Maya's life had narrowed to a small, dim apartment on the edge of the city, a job that barely covered gas and groceries, and a bank account that spent more time in the red than the black. Her fridge hummed like a ticking clock, the only sound in the apartment, other than the occasional buzz from her phone. Debt collectors. Again, she used to answer, used to try and explain. I'm between checks. I just need a little more time. But the script never changed. And eventually, she stopped playing her part. That day, the day everything shifted, started like most others. A burnt piece of toast, an empty coffee jar, her worn-down sneakers scraping the sidewalk as she walked to the bus stop, because gas money had gone toward her electricity bill this week. Inside her faded canvas bag was a paycheck stub for $498.12, and a rent notice for $850, stamped red. Final. She sat on the back of the bus, eyes scanning the math again. Rent, groceries, transit pass, phone. Nothing about those numbers added up. They never did. Not since she'd lost her second job 6 months ago. The retail gig that had made her feel just barely afloat. One layoff, one missed shift, that was all it took. Her world didn't unravel overnight. It frayed thread by thread. Maya wasn't reckless. She didn't party. She didn't travel. She hadn't bought a new outfit in over a year. But poverty doesn't always come from bad choices. Sometimes, it comes from no margin for error. The breaking point didn't come from a huge event. No one stormed in. No landlord threatened to evict her in person. It was a Tuesday. A small, gray, quiet Tuesday. She had just gotten home from work, shoes soaked from walking through puddles, when she opened her fridge and realized there was nothing inside but mustard, a half bag of rice, and a single egg. She stared at the shelves for a long time, then slowly shut the door. She stood in the middle of her apartment, dripping, as the silence pressed against her chest like a weight. And for the first time in a long time, she sat down and wept. Not a loud, dramatic cry, but the kind that sneaks up behind her eyes. Quiet, heavy, like her body finally admitted it couldn't carry everything anymore. It wasn't just about the food. It was what the emptiness represented. The uncertainty, the grind, the constant scramble. How long had she been pretending she was okay? The last time she remembered feeling secure was years ago, before the debt started piling up, before her hours were cut at work, before the world seemed to shift under her feet. She remembered the feeling of swiping her debit card without dread. She remembered opening her fridge and knowing she could cook something decent. Small memories, but they stung now. Her phone vibrated again. She didn't need a look. Another bill. Another notice. Another voice reminding her she was behind. Maya wiped her eyes and stood up, pacing the apartment like a caged animal. There wasn't much space. A table, a small couch, a kitchen that bled into the living room. A door that led to a bedroom she rarely slept in peacefully anymore. She saw a crumpled receipt on the counter. $4.95, canned soup, soda, a candy bar. It was nothing, but it was something. She picked it up, looked at it, really looked at it. She thought about the $5. Then she thought about the $42 still left in her account. And for the first time, she didn't think about what she couldn't buy. She thought about what she could control. She pulled open the drawer in the kitchen. There was a dusty, old spiral notebook from college. The cover was bent, the pages yellowing at the edges. But it was blank, waiting. She sat at the table, brushed off crumbs and receipts, and opened the notebook. She drew 2 columns on the first page. In, out. It looked ridiculous, childlike, but something shifted in her chest. She began writing. In, $498.12. Then under out, she started slowly. Rent, $850, overdue phone, 45 bus pass, 27 groceries. That last line made her stop. She didn't even know how much she spent on food. She just bought what she could afford, which, lately, was ramen, beans, and whatever was 2 for 1. But she'd never looked at it all on paper. She flipped to the next page. She wrote the day at the top, then listed every penny she had. Then she began a new rule. No spending unless it's written down first. That meant the vending machine at work was off limits unless she logged it. That meant no impulse snacks at the corner store. That meant planning. And planning meant power. She looked around her apartment. It was small, messy, unforgiving. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something unexpected. Control. A whisper of it. Faint, but real. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay in bed, eyes open, the notebook on her nightstand like a new anchor. Her mind spun with numbers, with categories, with ways she might stretch her money until the end of the month. The next morning, she made black tea instead of coffee, packed a peanut butter sandwich instead of eating out, wrote it all down in the notebook. One day didn't change everything, but it changed something. And sometimes, that's enough. By Sunday morning, the notebook wasn't just a budgeting tool. It was her compass. Each page filled with jagged handwriting, circled totals, scratched out temptations, and margin notes that only Maya could decode. One line read, "No coffee, worth it." Another, "Wait till Tuesday's sale." She didn't just track money. She tracked moments of choice. And that made all the difference. The pages weren't neat, but they were honest. Brutally, intimately honest. And with every entry, something subtle began to shift inside her. She was no longer reacting. She was recording, responding, reflecting, not surviving the week in blind panic, but scanning it like a map. By the second week, she had laid out her first rule book, 3 principles scribbled onto a sticky note she stuck to the front cover. The notebook rules. If it's not written, it doesn't get spent. No emotion purchases. Wait 24 hours. Pay yourself $5 every week, no matter what. The last rule was bold, almost reckless. She barely had enough for groceries, and she was setting money aside for herself. But it wasn't about the amount. It was about the habit, about carving space for dignity. And that $5, it became her most sacred line item. Every Friday, no matter how tight her budget got, she'd find a way. Some weeks it meant walking instead of taking the bus. Other weeks, it meant rice instead of anything else. But the ritual mattered. She'd write it in, underline it twice, $5 me. She didn't even know what she was saving it for yet. But it was hers. A statement of resistance against the chaos. It was around this time that people started noticing something. Kayla, her co-worker, leaned over the register one afternoon and whispered, "You're different lately. Like calmer or something." Maya smiled. "I got a notebook," she said. Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Like a journal?" "No," Maya replied, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "A budget. It's kind of dumb, but it's working." That was the first time Maya said the word budget out loud without flinching. For years, the word had felt like a verdict, a punishment, something adults said when they were about to tell her no. But now it felt empowering. Her notebook was full of yes. Not grand ones, but real ones. Yes to walking with a podcast instead of paying for a cab. Yes to making lentils taste better than she thought they could. Yes to knowing she could cover her phone bill 3 days before it was due. The more she budgeted, the more space opened up in her mind. The constant panic that used to drown her began to ebb, not vanish, but soften. She could breathe between the numbers. But then came the test. Week 3. She was standing in line at the corner store when she saw it. A pair of boots. Black faux leather, lace-up, half off. The kind she used to wear back in college, back when her feet didn't hurt after every shift. The tag read $19.99. Her size. Last pair. Her breath caught. She looked at her account balance on her phone. $67. Her bills for the week were already written out. Her food planned. Her $5 already saved. She could make it work. But rule number 2 blinked in her brain like a neon sign. No emotion purchases. Wait 24 hours. She turned around, left the store, hands shaking, heart pounding like she'd walked away from something bigger than shoes. That night, she opened the notebook and wrote, "Boots, $19.99. Want them." Waiting. It wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. She waited. 24 hours later, she went back. The boots were gone. She stood in front of the empty display and felt the disappointment sting in her throat. But it passed, faster than she expected, because what remained wasn't regret. What remained was power. She had proven to herself that she could pause, that her emotions didn't rule her anymore, that she had rules, and she followed them. She walked home, bought lentils on sale, and put an extra $5 in her envelope. Her notebook now lived everywhere with her. It became a third hand, a second spine. She drew symbols to track categories, stars for wins, excess for splurges, arrows for planned expenses. She sketched little boxes next to bills and colored them in as she paid them, like a kindergarten sticker chart for survival. And over time, something remarkable happened. She began looking forward to filling it out. Each evening became a ritual. Soft music, tea, her pen hovering over the page. Sometimes she only had $2 to log, but those $2 meant she was in control. She even started naming the weeks. Week 3, Lentil Life. Week 4, Grocery Gladiator. Week 5, No Spend Ninja. They made her laugh, and she needed a laugh, because laughter felt like proof that she wasn't drowning anymore. One night, flipping back through her entries, she noticed a trend. Every week, she'd somehow found a way to come in just under budget. $2 here, $3 there. She circled those lines in green. She took the green circled totals and made a new page at the back of the notebook. Wiggle room. It was only $12 by then, but it felt like a fortune, like a cushion, a whisper of safety. She wrote underneath, emergency eggs, emergency smile. It was silly, but also sacred. This was how Maya began to rebuild, not with windfalls, not with miracles, but with decisions. Small, patient, stubborn decisions. And the more she stuck to the notebook, the more she began to believe something radical. That maybe her life could be designed. That maybe budgeting wasn't a sentence. It was a strategy. That maybe the notebook wasn't a constraint. Maybe it was a blueprint. It started as a joke. A small white envelope with $5. Me scribbled on the front in smudged blue ink. She had tucked it between 2 cookbooks she never used, thinking she might forget it. But she didn't. Not once. Each week, like clockwork, Maya slid a wrinkled $5 bill into that envelope. No matter how tight the numbers got, it was her promise, her non-negotiable. And by week 6, that envelope held $30. Not a fortune, but it felt like one. Because it wasn't just money. It was identity. A statement to herself that she mattered, even when the world and her budget insisted otherwise. One afternoon, while walking back from work, Maya ducked into a secondhand bookstore she used to love in college. The door creaked, open like a memory. Dust and vanilla-scented pages filled the air. She didn't come to buy anything. She just needed to breathe somewhere that didn't remind her of debt. She ran her fingers along cracked spines, gently thumbing through pages. Titles on philosophy, poetry, personal finance. Most of them she'd never be able to afford brand new. And then, tucked into the corner, resting on a faded display, she saw it. A small hardcover journal. Black. Unused. For dollars even. She hesitated, then reached for her envelope. At home, she peeled it open and slid out the $5 bill. For the first time, she was spending from the envelope. She wrote in the front of the new journal, the $5 book, things I learn about money. And on the next page, in neat, careful handwriting, I don't hate budgeting. I hate not knowing. Poverty is expensive, but clarity is free. I'm not bad at money. I just never had a teacher. That evening, she added another page to her budgeting notebook, a calendar. At the top, she wrote, budget weeks instead of regular dates. Week 6 became the $5 book week. She also drew a small dollar sign every Friday, reminding her to feed the envelope. It became a rhythm, sacred. Even when she had only $22 left after bills 1 week, she still saved $5. That week, she lived off rice and carrots and frozen peas. But she wrote every meal down, tracked every dime, and at the end of it, she circled her total spend in red and wrote one word next to it. Still stood. By now, her old habits were fading. No more impulse snacks. No more tiny Amazon splurges. No more justifying things with, I deserve it, when what she deserved was peace of mind. The notebook and the envelope weren't restricting her. They were freeing her. One morning, standing in front of the mirror, Maya noticed something strange. She looked brighter. Her face was still tired. Her clothes still thrifted. But her eyes, they were clear, focused. That was the day she added another line to her $5 book. My confidence is compound interest. The envelope grew. $5 a week. Week 6, $30. Week 7, $35. Week 8, $40. Week 9, $45. At week 10, she paused. She laid out all 9 bills on the table, side by side, like a trail of small victories. And then, for the first time since starting, she let herself use it. She bought a new pair of black flats. Nothing fancy, but supportive and comfortable for long shifts. $22. She hesitated before breaking the seal on the envelope. But she told herself this was what it was for. She put the change back, counted what remained. $23. Then she did something even bolder. She created a second envelope. Future Maya. She split what was left. $10 into Future Maya. $13 back into her original envelope. 2 names now. 2 paths. Because this wasn't just about today anymore. She was building towards someone. Later that night, curled on the couch, she added one last line to the $5 book before bed. I'm no longer waiting for money to save me. I am saving me. It was around this time that Maya began noticing her anxiety was quieter. It hadn't vanished, but it wasn't in control anymore. She still had bad days. There were weeks she hated the notebook, days she cried over beans again. But those moments didn't shake her anymore, because now there was a system, a rhythm, an envelope with her name on it, a book of lessons she wrote herself. And for the first time in her adult life, Maya didn't feel like she was trying to escape her financial life. She was starting to own it. There was a strange power in knowing she only had $27 for groceries. Not panic, not shame, power. Because this time, Maya planned for it. She sat at the kitchen table with her notebook open, pen in hand, phone calculator at the ready. A flyer from a neighborhood discount store lay beside her, circled with sales in bright pink ink. Eggs, 2 dozen for $3.19. Canned tomatoes, 2 for $1. Frozen spinach, 99 cents. Oats, lentils, bananas. For years, Maya had associated budgeting with scarcity, with saying no, with feeling like she was already behind. But now, it meant she knew what was coming. And that gave her something she hadn't felt in months. Dignity. There were moments, of course, when the system cracked. Like the time she stood at the register, watching the numbers tick up on the screen, breath catching in her chest as the total hit $27.12. She looked down at the conveyor belt. There wasn't a single item she didn't need. Her cheeks flushed. The line behind her buzzed with quiet impatience. But instead of panicking, she pulled a can of beans from a pile and said softly, "Let's put this one back." The cashier nodded. The total adjusted. $26.18. She handed over her cash and walked home with her head high. That night, she wrote about it in her notebook. Didn't flinch today, just adjusted. Then she added something she hadn't written before. I'm proud of me. She circled it twice. At work, she was still invisible to most. Maya was quiet, efficient, the type of employee who didn't stir much, who always showed up 5 minutes early, and who smiled when customers were rude. But inside, something had shifted. She was budgeting with intention, not guilt, with clarity, not chaos. She packed lunches that didn't feel like sacrifices, homemade wraps, simple rice bowls, fruit with cinnamon. She prepped on Sundays, made lists that matched the store layout, and refused to buy anything that wasn't on the page. And every time she passed the impulse rack, chips, candy bars, drinks chilled just right, she whispered, "Not today." It wasn't deprivation. It was choice. By week 11, she had started adding a new section to her pages. Wins. Small victories that would have gone unnoticed before. Used leftover lentils in a new way. Didn't order takeout, even though I was tired. Told Kayla I was budgeting. She wanted to try too. Paid electricity early. Each line was like a stone in the foundation she was laying. Not flashy, not viral, but solid. One night, she wrote in the $5 book, "Budgeting is not about what I can't do. It's how I honor what I can." Then came the envelope expansion. She now had 5. Me. Future Maya. Emergencies. Gifts. Joy Fund. That last one surprised even her. It had only $8.50 in it. But it meant she was building space for beauty. Not just survival. Beauty. When her cousin texted her that her niece's birthday was coming up, Maya didn't panic. She opened the gifts envelope and pulled out a $5 bill. At the dollar store, she bought a small box of crayons, a journal with glitter stars, and a bubble wand. She wrapped them with tissue paper and tied a ribbon from a box of recycled gift supplies she kept tucked in the closet. And when her niece opened it with a squeal of joy, Maya smiled from deep in her chest. That smile was worth more than any dollar she spent. At home, she wrote, I gave without guilt. That's what dignity tastes like. Budgeting wasn't about restriction anymore. It was about respect. Respect for her time. Respect for her effort. Respect for the future she wanted to build, $1 at a time. She was still broke on paper. Her income hadn't changed. Her debts still hovered. Her rent still loomed. But Maya had something she didn't before. Authority. She was driving her financial life now, not drifting in it. And that changed everything. It happened on a Monday. Not a dramatic, movie-style crash. No smoke or fire. Just a quiet click as Maya turned the key in the ignition, and nothing happened. Once. Twice. A third time. Silence. She sat there for a moment in the driver's seat of her old Hyundai, forehead resting against the steering wheel, listening to the creak of the plastic around her as the morning sun burned into her jacket. Her breath didn't come right away. It sat stuck in her chest, like the words she wasn't ready to say, because this was the one thing she hadn't planned for. The car was old, 10 years, maybe more, but it had always started. And in a life built around fragile systems, that was all she had asked of it. Get her to work. Get her home. No promises beyond that. But now it was dead, and Maya felt something cold rise up from her stomach to her throat. She was supposed to open the store that morning. She reached for her phone and checked her balance. $94.03. In her envelopes. $5. Me. $15. Future Maya. $20. Emergencies. $30.50. Joy Fund. $10. Gifts. Empty. She did the math in her head. Maybe $160 total. Not enough to fix a car. Not nearly enough. She could feel panic waiting, just under her ribs, scratching to be let out. But instead of spiraling, she reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. And she did what she taught herself to do when things spun sideways. She wrote, Car dead, 7:42 a.m. Tow. Can I get help? Bus, $2.25 x 2 equals $4.50 per day. Call Kayla. Can cover shift. Need plan by noon. Writing made it real, yes, but it also made it solvable. Panic is the enemy of math. But writing? Writing is a blueprint. She called Kayla first, explained in quiet, clipped tones what had happened. Kayla, without hesitation, said, I got you. I'll open. Maya exhaled. Then she pulled up the transit app, mapped the bus line. It would take 50 minutes to get to work. 2 buses. She didn't own a monthly pass anymore, but she had exact change. She packed her lunch, grabbed her tote, and walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, notebook in hand. And she didn't cry, because while her car was broken, she wasn't. The ride was long, hot, and crowded. But as she sat by the window, Maya made a list in her notebook titled, Emergency Strategy, Week 13. Call 3 local auto shops for tow quotes. Check with neighbors about jumper cables. Post in community Facebook group for mobile mechanic. Ask boss about flexible hours for bus schedule. Increase emergency envelope by $5 per week. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a plan, and that gave her power back. That afternoon, after her shift, Maya walked home under a low gray sky. Her phone buzzed. A reply from her Facebook post. Hi Maya, I'm a certified mechanic. I live 2 blocks away. I can swing by with jumper cables around 6 if you're home. She smiled. Type back. Yes, thank you. I'll be here. At 6:03 p.m., the knock came. Mr. Lorenzo was in his 60s, with a beard that looked like silver moss and a kind face. They talked for a bit. He said her battery was probably gone, but he'd give it a try. The jump didn't work, but he did test it. It's your starter, he said. Not the worst fix. I can do it for parts and $40 if you buy the piece. Maya blinked. 40. She thanked him a dozen times. She transferred $30 from her emergency envelope. Took $10 from future Maya. That left her envelope untouched. That mattered to her. She spent the next morning riding the bus again. this time to the auto shop with a part number written in her notebook. The starter cost $48. She paid in cash. They didn't even charge tax. By Thursday, the car was running again. It still rattled when she hit 40, and the stereo didn't work on rainy days, but it started. And when she got back home that night, she pulled out her notebook and wrote on a fresh page. Disaster avoided log number 1. Car died. Didn't panic. Didn't borrow. Didn't lose control. Took the bus. Built a plan. Paid cash. Still standing. She drew a line beneath it. Then another. Then she wrote, I'm allowed to be proud of me. That night, she did something she hadn't done in months. She took a long, hot shower, put on her softest hoodie, lit her one remaining candle, and danced, just a little, barefoot on the tile floor of her apartment. Not because the world was fixed, but because she was okay. And that, for Maya, was everything. The number was 513. She saw it on a borrowed phone, in a borrowed moment, standing in the break room of her job with cold fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Maya had finally worked up the courage to check her credit score. 513. Her stomach dropped, but she didn't flinch. Not this time, because that number didn't define her. Not anymore. It was a symptom, not her sentence. 3 years ago, that number would have crushed her. It would have felt like failure carved into a screen. A confirmation of everything she'd feared was true, that she was irresponsible, broken, beyond repair. But Maya wasn't that girl anymore. She had a notebook now, a system, and more importantly, she had proof. Pages and pages of proof that she could keep a promise to herself. Still, seeing it written out, 513, was like staring at a scar you'd forgotten you had. So she wrote it down, not to punish herself. To begin, week 14, credit check, 513. Goal, 620 by next year. 100 points. I can climb. She circled the number, then drew a small mountain next to it, the peak marked with a flag. That weekend, Maya started her first credit learning day. She didn't have Wi-Fi at home, so she went to the library, carried her notebook, a pen, and a pair of old headphones. She sat in the corner seat by the window and typed, How to rebuild your credit score. Hours passed. She watched videos, took notes, Googled terms she didn't understand. APR, utilization rate, hard inquiry. She scribbled facts like armor. Pay on time. Always. Keep credit usage under 30%. Dispute inaccuracies. Open secured card equals good start. Credit Karma is free, but monitor elsewhere too. She checked her account again, still hovering just above $100. Not enough to pay anything extra. Not yet. But knowledge? That didn't cost her a cent. She wrote in the $5 book, I used to avoid this stuff. Now it's mine. By week 15, she had built a credit climb plan. Step 1, pull full credit report done. Step 2, highlight and dispute 2 outdated accounts, pending. Step 3, open secured card, needs $200 deposit. Goal for month 3. Step 4, use for one small purchase/month. Pay in full. Step 5, track score monthly. She added a small credit score tracker to the back of her budget notebook, labeled it like a timeline. Week 14, 513. Week 18, ____. Week 22, ____. Week 30, ____. Every time she paid her phone bill early or kept her spending under budget, she smiled. Because she knew what she was doing now. She was building trust with herself and with the system that had once shut her out. One morning, the apartment manager called. Maya froze. He asked for her to stop by the office. Her rent history had finally caught up. Late payments, 2 prior notices. They were reviewing renewals. There might be adjustments. Maya nodded quietly, hung up, then sat on the edge of her bed, fists clenched. But she didn't panic. She opened the notebook and wrote, If they raise rent, check neighbor listings. If I must move, find sublet option. Keep envelope system intact. And then, because she knew fear was no match for facts, she logged onto the community housing site. Found 3 listings in the same zip code, all within $50 of her current rent. None were ideal, but that wasn't the point. The point was, she had options. She had plans. She walked into the office that afternoon ready. Not because she wanted confrontation, but because she was done living in the dark. Turned out, they were just asking for updated income documentation. No rent raise. No threat. She left the office feeling like she'd dodged a bullet. But more than that, like she'd worn a bulletproof vest. By week 18, her score nudged up, 518. Just 5 points. But when she saw the number, she grinned. Because it had moved. It had moved. She wrote, Week 18, plus 5 points. This is what healing looks like. Then she pulled $10 from her envelope and walked to the corner cafe, the one she used to avoid like a plague. She ordered 1 coffee. Black. No sugar. She didn't look at the pastry case. Didn't need to. She sat by the window, notebook open, watching the sun filter through her reflection. And she toasted herself quietly. To every small, invisible act of discipline no one applauds but me. Maya no longer feared the system. She was learning how to work with it, to understand its language, to bend without breaking, to believe that rebuilding didn't mean pretending nothing happened. It meant showing up anyway. $1. 1 point. 1 choice at a time. Her credit score wasn't perfect. Her life wasn't either. But now, she had 2 things she'd never had before. A plan and belief. And both of them were growing. It began as a dare to herself. One quiet night, curled on the futon with her budget notebook in her lap and 3 nearly empty envelopes staring back at her, Maya wrote 3 words in block letters across the top of the next page. No spend month. Then, beneath it, 1 month. Only essentials. No exceptions. Let's see what's left. Maya had learned by now that money wasn't just about math. It was emotion. It was memory. It was mood, hunger, boredom, envy, celebration, grief, all of it tangled in every swipe of a card, every split-second decision at the checkout line. She'd been careful for months, but she wanted more. She wanted mastery, not over the system, over herself. Her rules were clear. Essentials only: rent, utilities, phone, transit, groceries. No eating out. No takeout. No coffee shops. No clothing. No Amazon. No snacks. No candles. If it wasn't survival, it didn't make the list. And every dollar had to be tracked. Twice. She labeled it week 19. A whole new rhythm. The first 3 days were easy. She was used to restraint by now. Her pantry was stocked with rice, lentils, frozen vegetables, and discount oatmeal. She prepped simple meals, planned her bus rides, packed lunches like clockwork. But by day 4, the urge crept in. A coworker's birthday meant cupcakes in the break room. A spontaneous suggestion to split lunch. Everyone pitching in. Maya smiled, apologized, and stepped outside with her brown paper bag. She sat on the back steps alone, unwrapping her homemade wrap with slightly wilted lettuce. She felt the shame start to climb her throat. But then she flipped open the $5 book and wrote, Day 4. I chose my goal. That is more important than frosting. By the second week, something shifted. Instead of feeling restricted, Maya felt quiet. The world slowed down. Without the constant hum of spending, browsing, scrolling, considering, swiping, she could hear herself think. She noticed things. The wind moving through the bus shelter. The smell of oranges in the grocery aisle. The way her stomach actually didn't mind skipping coffee. The satisfaction of eating every meal she planned. She wrote, Day 9. I don't miss the noise. I miss who I used to be when things were simple. Midway through, temptation struck hard. A pop-up sale from her favorite online store. 70% off. 1 day only. Boots she had dreamed about. Her size. $24.95. Her fingers hovered over the checkout button. Her emergency fund had just hit $50. The math said she could do it. But her notebook didn't lie. She closed the tab, threw her phone on the couch, stared at the ceiling. Then, after 10 minutes of silence, she got up, opened her notebook, and wrote a full page. This is how I build muscle. This is how I build patience. This is how I remember that joy can wait. They're just boots. I'm building something bigger. By the 3rd week, Maya had a rhythm. She cooked creatively. Peanut butter stir-fry, sweet potato hash, banana pancakes from overripe leftovers. She swapped old library books with her neighbor, walked instead of bust, dug out a yoga mat from under the bed, and started stretching in the morning. Even her sleep felt deeper. She called it quiet abundance. But the real test came on day 26. A Friday. Maya was exhausted. She'd missed her bus and walked the final mile. She was sore, frustrated. She just got her paycheck, and all she wanted, desperately, was a large hot pizza. $11. It would have been so easy. Just one app tap. She could even eat half and save the rest. She deserved it, right? But then she opened her notebook. She turned to the first page of the month, and she saw her promise. No spend month. No exceptions. She held the pen in her hand and let the moment burn. Then she made a peanut butter sandwich, heated up some leftover soup, took a hot shower, put on music, and when she sat down to eat, it wasn't with shame. It was with power. On day 30, she tallied everything. Grocery spending, $96.24. Transit, $18. Total spent, $114.24. Previous average, $270. Money saved this month, $155.76. She stared at the number. That wasn't just a win. That was a shift. She added $100 to her emergency envelope, $30 to future Maya, and yes, $25 to her joy fund. Then she opened her $5 book and wrote. This wasn't punishment. This was presence. I remembered what enough feels like. And now, I trust me. She didn't plan to live no spend forever. But now she knew she could. And that mattered more than anything she could have bought. It started with a sandwich. Maya was unwrapping hers. Whole wheat bread, peanut butter, and sliced banana. The kind of simple, satisfying lunch she had come to love when Kayla dropped her takeout bag on the table and sighed. $12, she muttered. For a wrap that doesn't even have real chicken in it. Maya smiled, quietly, sipped her water, watched Kayla poke the soggy bread like it had insulted her. Then, Kayla leaned in. You always bring lunch now, she said. Like always. Maya nodded. Helps me stay on budget. Kayla laughed, almost reflexively. Budget? Ugh. I wouldn't even know where to start. Maya's fingers tapped the edge of her lunchbox. And then, after a pause, she said the words that surprised even her. I could show you, if you want. That afternoon, they sat together in the break room after hours, plastic chairs pulled up to a wobbly table. Maya's spiral notebook opened between them like a secret. Kayla leaned over, eyes wide. You really do this every day? Maya smiled. Not just every day. Every dollar. She flipped through the pages, letting Kayla see the pencil columns, color-coded categories, the scribbles and sticky notes, and growing rows of check marks. Kayla blinked. You don't even make that much more than me. I don't, Maya said. I just tell my money where to go before it disappears. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Kayla started bringing her own lunches, leftover rice and beans, tuna sandwiches, the occasional mystery stew she referred to only as budget gumbo. She brought a dollar store notebook and asked Maya to help her set up columns. In and out, just like hers. At first, it was funny, light, a little messy. But by week 2, Kayla was texting her photos of receipts. Is $3.89 too much for almond milk? Look, I skipped Starbucks today. Do impulse Amazon window shops count? Maya laughed at that one and replied, only if you click buy. Otherwise, it's just therapy. They created a code together. Emoji flags for spending triggers. French fries equals fast food temptation. Basket equals grocery haul under $25. Chart decreasing equals debt paid. Fire equals emotional spend avoided. Oncoming fist equals budget win. And slowly, Maya realized something she hadn't expected. She was becoming the teacher. One night, Kayla showed her a spreadsheet she'd made. Maya looked at it, rows and formulas and colors, and felt something twist in her chest. I didn't go to college, she whispered. Kayla looked confused. So, Maya shrugged. I don't know Excel. I just write in the notebook. Kayla smiled, slid her phone across the table. On the screen, a text thread between Kayla and her cousin. You have to talk to Maya. She's the reason I've got $80 in my savings account for the first time in ever. Maya stared at it. I told her you were the money whisperer, Kayla added. Maya didn't know what to say, because for most of her life, she had believed she was bad with money. And now, people were asking her how to save it. By week 24, they had started meeting every Saturday morning at the library. 2 women, 2 notebooks, 2 paper cups of cheap coffee. They called it Budget Club. It was unofficial, unadvertised, but sacred. Sometimes they said nothing, just flipped pages and nodded. Other times, they opened up, Maya learned that Kayla had $4,000 in credit card debt and never looked at the total until Maya showed her how to log each card. Kayla learned that Maya still sometimes cried over groceries and still panicked when her bank app took too long to load. And somehow, that made them both feel stronger. Together, they made a game. Who could do the best no-spend weekend? Who could find the cheapest protein program? Who could cut $10 off their electric bill? They swapped tips, shared receipts, celebrated every tiny win. Kayla hit her first $200 in savings by the end of month 6. Maya brought cupcakes with coupons. They laughed, cried, and toasted with off-brand soda. But the moment that meant the most, when Kayla pulled a sticky note from her purse and handed it to Maya. It read, "Rent, paid early. Groceries, under budget. Emergency fund, $60. Still standing. Flex biceps." Maya was right. Maya folded the note carefully, tucked in her notebook like a badge. Because now, her story wasn't just hers anymore. She was part of something. She was building legacy, not just survival. And for the first time in her life, Maya believed. She wasn't just healing herself. She was helping others learn how to begin. It started with a sore throat. Just a scratchy tickle at first. Nothing serious. She brewed her ginger tea, took deep breaths, and kept moving. Maya couldn't afford to slow down. She'd been running on momentum, routines, notebooks, budgets, and quiet wins. She was 2 months into her emergency fund goal and had finally started sleeping through the night without waking up panicked about rent. But by Wednesday, her throat had turned raw. Her chest ached. The cough hit hard and didn't let up. Her nose was a faucet. Her energy, gone. And on Thursday morning, as she stood in the bathroom staring at her own glassy-eyed reflection, Maya had to admit the thing she hadn't said in years. She needed rest. That morning, she texted Kayla, "Think I have a fever. Can't open today." Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard after that. She didn't want to send the next text. "Could you cover me?" 3 dots blinked. Then came a reply. "Of course. Rest. I'll bring soup later." Maya put down her phone and leaned against the sink. And for the first time in years, she let herself not go into work, without the crushing shame that used to follow that decision. She had an emergency fund now. She had options. She still felt uneasy. Sick time meant no pay. A missed shift meant tighter math. She pulled out her notebook, opened the emergency strategy section, and recalculated the next 2 weeks. Rent equals covered. Phone equals paid early last week. Food equals already stocked. Bus fare equals not needed this week. Missed shift loss, $1.78. Envelope backup, $120 across funds. She moved $20 from Joy Fund into emergencies. Wrote a note beside it. Joy can wait. Healing can't. Then she drank water, took medicine, and went back to bed. By day 3, she had barely left the couch. Tissue surrounded her like wilted petals. Her voice was a whisper, but her mind, it was loud. Doubts crept in between coughs. Was she slipping? Was she about to unravel all her progress? She reached for her notebook with trembling fingers. Wrote slowly, still in control. Even now, still tracking. This isn't failure. This is rest. And just like that, the fog in her head lifted, just a little. On day 4, Kayla arrived at the door. Soup in one hand, a fresh notebook in the other. She grinned. "Figured you'd need this soon." Maya laughed weakly. "You know me too well. You taught me," Kayla said. They sat in silence for a while, Maya sipping soup, Kayla flipping through old budget pages. Then Kayla asked, "What's it like, being sick with a plan?" Maya exhaled. "Honestly, it's the first time I've ever been able to breathe while sick." By day 7, Maya was still recovering, but she was thinking again. Clearer now. More grateful. She didn't fall behind on rent. She didn't skip meals. She didn't panic. She had planned for this. That week, she wrote a new page in her $5 book. You don't prepare because you're weak. You prepare because you'll get tired. Your future self will get sick. She will grieve. She will stumble. And you are building something that can hold her. When her paycheck came in the following week, she didn't need to scramble. She allocated everything carefully. Topped off her emergencies envelope. Gave herself $10 in the me fund. Lit a candle. Made tea. And took a full hour to breathe. And in that hour, something quiet and profound settled in her chest. She was safe inside her own life. Not rich. Not finished. But safe. Because the system she'd built didn't break when she did. It held her. She wrote one final note that night, right before bed. I'm no longer budgeting for perfection. I am budgeting for humanity. This system is not just survival. It is care. The number glowed on her screen like a tiny miracle. $1,007.84. That was her emergency fund. For digits. For glorious, hard-earned digits. Maya stared at it, jaw slack, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Because this wasn't a windfall. It hadn't come from some miracle, a side hustle gone viral, or a sudden raise. No, it came from grocery lists, envelope systems, walking instead of Uber, rice and beans, no-spend weekends, skipped candles, packed lunches, reused notebooks, and hard conversations with herself when no one else was watching. It came from discipline, and from finally believing that she was worthy of safety. The journey to $1,000 hadn't been a straight line. There were months she could only add $10. Weeks where she had to pull from the fund, once for a new battery, once when she got sick, and once to help her cousin buy diapers. Each time she made a withdrawal, she logged it carefully, but she always returned, always rebuilt. She called it the fund of second chances. And now, it had finally crossed into 4-digit territory. She flipped open her notebook and wrote at the top of the page in all caps, I have $1,000 saved. Me, Maya, $1,007.84. Then below it, in smaller letters, no one gave me this. I gave it to myself. She celebrated by buying herself a bouquet of yellow daisies. $4.99 from the corner store. They sat in a chipped glass jar on the windowsill. Sunlight poured through the petals, and she whispered to herself, this is what blooming looks like. That week, Kayla asked if they could host a mini-budget workshop. Just for a few friends, she said. They've seen my notebooks. People are curious. Maya hesitated. She wasn't an expert. She didn't have a degree in finance. She wasn't rich. She still budgeted toilet paper. But Kayla said, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be real. So on a Saturday afternoon, 5 women crammed into Maya's tiny apartment. They sat cross-legged on the floor, on folding chairs, on couch cushions. Maya served dollar store tea and oatmeal cookies. And then she opened her notebook. She told them about her first red rent notice, about the mustard and rice fridge moment, about the day her car broke down, about the notebook rule, no spending without writing it down. She told them about envelopes, about the $5 me fund, about the joy envelope, about the future stash she started before she even believed she had one. And she showed them the $1,007 screenshot on her phone. The room went still. Then someone clapped. Then they all did. Maya flushed, but she smiled. And inside, something clicked. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was leading. That night, she wrote a new page in the $5 book. Today, I was the woman I needed 5 years ago. She didn't come from money. She came from a notebook. She taught others. And they listened. I am the proof I used to need. The next morning, Maya walked to her job with her earbuds in, music playing, sun on her face. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. The weight she used to carry around her shoulders was lighter. Her steps more confident. The bus stop didn't feel like a failure anymore. It felt like a choice. She smiled as she passed the bank she used to avoid. Not because she had thousands, but because she knew how to build thousands. One envelope at a time. One hard choice at a time. One belief at a time. Later that evening, she added a new envelope to her drawer. This one wasn't labeled me, or emergencies, or joy. This one had just 2 words. Next chapter. And with trembling fingers, she placed the first $5 bill inside. It came folded in half, slipped under her door like a secret. A plain white letter. Maya found it one evening after work, her keys still in hand, tote bag sagging against her hip. She bent down slowly, picked it up, and read the landlord's letter right there on the welcome mat. We're offering early renewal for long-term tenants. New lease available. Discounted rent, if paid in full by the 1st. She reread it. Then again. Discounted rent. If she could pay in full, early. Her eyes jumped to the numbers. Her current rent, $850 per month. The new offer, $800 per month for early payment, locked in for 12 months. A $600 savings over the year. But there was a catch. The deposit for the new lease, $800, due in full with the first month's rent. Due in 2 weeks. She felt her stomach drop. She sat on the couch, the letter clutched in her hand, notebook open across her knees. She flipped to her savings tracker. Emergency, $1,007.84. Future Maya, $65. Joy, $10. Next chapter, $5. Could she do it? Could she spend almost everything she'd saved just to stay in this place for less? Maya had dreamed of leaving the apartment one day. The peeling walls, the leaky faucet, the neighbor who played trumpet at midnight. But right now, she couldn't afford to move. She didn't want to move. Not yet. This place had become a symbol, not of struggle anymore, but of transformation. And $800 to secure that stability for another year? That wasn't just rent. It was peace of mind. She wrote on a fresh page. Scene, apartment offer. Risk, using emergency fund. Reward, lower rent for 12 months. Emotional check, I feel nervous, but not afraid. She circled that last line. The next morning, she packed breakfast and took her notebook to the park. Sat on a bench beneath a half-blooming tree, pen in hand, and she ran the numbers. If she accepted the offer, her rent would go down by $50 per month. She could redirect that savings back into her emergency fund. By month 5, she'd recover the deposit. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart. And more than that, it was the first time she'd ever had the option to accept an opportunity because of how she'd planned, not despite it. She didn't need to ask for help, didn't need to borrow, didn't need to panic. She just needed to decide. And so she did. She walked into the leasing office the next day with a cashier's check for $800 and a calm she hadn't known she was capable of. The manager, Mr. Halstead, looked surprised. "Wow, that was quick," he said. Maya smiled. "I've been preparing for something like this." He nodded, slid the new lease across the desk. She signed it with steady hands. Back at home, she sat on her bed and stared at her now nearly empty emergency fund log. She'd never seen it this low since she began. And yet, she didn't feel fear. She felt pride. She wrote at the top of the next notebook page, "I just paid $800 in full without borrowing. I'm not broke. I'm not behind. I am becoming." That night, she bought herself a $2 chocolate bar and a lavender-scented dish soap from the discount shelf. Little luxuries. Nothing more. But as she washed her dishes with the new soap, soft bubbles rising between her fingers, she smiled. Because this was her space now. Her rent. Her rules. Her dignity. The next morning, she added one more envelope to her system. She labeled it in blue marker. Freedom Fund. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about positioning herself for the next move, the next dream, the next chapter that was no longer someday. And with $3 in her wallet, she folded one into the envelope. She smiled. $1,003 to go. The folding chair beneath her creaked as Maya waited backstage. Fingers curled tightly around a wrinkled index card. Her palms were damp. Her stomach twisted. She had never spoken in front of a crowd before. Not once. Not in high school. Not in college. Not even at work meetings. But today was different. Today, she wasn't being asked to perform. She had been invited to tell her story. It started with a message. Kayla had passed Maya's name to someone at the community center, someone planning a local financial wellness panel for women navigating economic hardship. Low-income earners, single moms, college students drowning in debt. "You should speak," Kayla said. Maya had laughed. Loudly. "I'm not a financial expert," she replied. "No," Kayla said, "but you're the first person who ever made budgeting feel human." That stuck with her. Budgeting felt human. It hadn't always. It used to feel like a punishment, a cage. But now it felt like permission. To take up space. To decide her direction. To breathe. So she said yes. The auditorium wasn't large. Maybe 70 folding chairs, 2 standing mics, and a dusty podium. The crowd was mixed. Young women with baby carriers. Middle-aged women holding notebooks. A few older men with crossed arms and curious eyes. No one wore a suit. And that calmed her. Because these were her people. People who didn't need polished theories or investment jargon. They needed proof that it was possible to begin. Maya stood, heart pounding, as they called her name. Our next speaker is Maya L., who paid off her first $1,000 of debt and built her emergency fund on a minimum wage income, using a spiral notebook and a whole lot of grit. The applause felt surreal. She stepped up, took the mic, took a breath, and began. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't go to college for finance. And for a long time, I believed I was just bad at money. But I wasn't bad. I was uninformed. I was unprepared. I was unprotected. And most of all, I was ashamed. She paused. You see, when you're poor, budgeting doesn't feel empowering. It feels cruel. It feels like writing down the proof of your failure over and over again. But then something shifted. She held up the notebook, dog-eared, full, and faded. This isn't a miracle tool. It's just paper and ink. But it changed my life. Because it gave me a place to tell the truth about my money without being punished for it. Heads nodded. Pens scribbled. Some faces softened. She kept going. I didn't get out of poverty overnight. I didn't erase my debt in a month. I still budget toilet paper. I still ride the bus. But I sleep better. I don't fear rent day. I have a me fund, even if it's $5. I have emergency fund. I even have a joy envelope. Because budgeting shouldn't just be about surviving. It should include space for you. She closed her notes, took a deep breath, and said the words she had never dared say out loud before. I'm no longer afraid of money. And I want you to know, you don't have to be either. The room was quiet. Then applause. Strong. Honest. Some stood. One woman in the back wiped her eyes. Afterward, people lined up. They didn't ask about compound interest or 401ks. They asked, how did you start? What if I only have $20? What if I've already messed up? And Maya told them the truth. You start with what you have. You forgive yourself. You write it down. You try again, and again, and again. One woman, maybe in her 50s, handed Maya a wrinkled $10 bill and said, this is to pay it forward. Maya refused. Instead, she gave the woman a fresh notebook from her bag. No, she said, you're going to start your story today. That night, Maya walked home under the orange wash of streetlights. She passed the bank she once avoided, the grocery store where she'd memorized every sale tag, the bus stop that once felt like a prison. But none of those places scared her now, because she had stood on a stage and told her truth, not because she was rich, or done, or perfect, but because she was real, and real was enough. She got home, made tea, opened her notebook, and flipped to a clean page. At the top, she wrote, tonight I spoke in front of strangers, not as a victim, not as a statistic, as a woman who learned how to survive, with a pen. I think this is what power feels like. And below it, this story isn't finished, but I'm finally the one writing it. Maya had never seen a paycheck look like that. The number on the stub didn't register at first. She turned it over, double-checked the name, the dates, the hours. All correct. But the total? It was $327 more than usual. For a moment, she panicked. She thought they'd made a mistake. A clerical error. Something that would be clawed back next week. But tucked in the top corner, printed in plain type, were two words she never expected to see next to her name. Performance bonus. She stared at it in stunned silence, sitting on the edge of her bed with her shoes still on. A bonus. No warning. No meeting. No ceremony. Just acknowledgement. From the place that had once made her feel invisible. She called Kayla first. They gave me a bonus, Maya whispered, like it might vanish if she spoke too loud. Kayla squealed. Girl, you earned that. You've been running that front desk like it's your own business. Maya laughed, but the tears came anyway. Not because of the money. Because for once, the world had seen her. It took her 3 hours to decide what to do. 3 years ago, Maya would have blown it. Pizza, new shoes, makeup, a night out, maybe something impulsive online, just to feel good for a few hours. But now, she knew this money was different. Not just in amount, but in meaning. She opened her notebook and created a new page. Bonus breakdown, $327. She listed her options like puzzle pieces. Add to emergency fund. Pay extra on phone bill. Put some in joy. Save for something big. Then she remembered something from the workshop. One of the women had asked, what's the difference between spending wisely and living in fear? Maya had answered without thinking. Spending wisely includes room for your soul. She reread that and smiled. She split the bonus into 4 envelopes. $100 to emergency. $75 to future Maya. $27 to joy. $125 to create a brand new envelope. Investing. She'd been reading about it for months now, learning, quietly, in library corners and online forums. She didn't fully understand ETFs or mutual funds yet, but she knew this. You didn't need thousands to begin. You just needed something. And now, she had something. The next morning, Maya walked into the bank and opened a high-yield savings account for the investing envelope. The clerk asked what she was saving for. Maya paused, then said softly, "My future." That afternoon, she treated herself. Not recklessly. She went to her favorite thrift store and bought a $6 dress. Black, flowy, with tiny red flowers. It wasn't flashy, but it made her feel beautiful, like she could walk into any room and belong there, because she finally believed that she did. When she got home, she tried it on, spun once in front of the mirror, and then curled up on the couch with her notebook. She wrote, "I received a bonus for the first time. I used it with intention. I'm no longer chasing worth. I am building it." This was never about getting rich. It was about feeling safe. Today I feel safe, and that is wealth. Maya knew more money would come someday, and more decisions too. But for now, she let herself savor this one. Not because it changed her life, but because it proved something even more powerful, that she could be trusted with more. And she was ready for it. It was a Wednesday night when Maya's phone buzzed. She was sitting on the floor, candles lit, organizing her grocery list in her notebook. The fridge hummed behind her, nearly full. Chicken thighs, frozen spinach, eggs, a half carton of oat milk. A picture of security. When the name flashed across her screen, Lena Yellowheart, Maya smiled instinctively. It had been a few weeks since they last spoke. Her older sister lived 3 cities over, raising 2 kids with barely enough hours at her job to keep the lights on. Maya tapped, "Accept." "Hey," she said, stretching the word like warmth. But the voice on the other end didn't greet her back. It cracked. "Maya, I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call." Lena was crying, and Maya, heart racing, sat frozen on the floor with her grocery list still open, a pen dangling in her hand. She listened, carefully, patiently. The kids were okay, but the rent check had bounced. Lena's hours at the diner had been cut again. A late payment on her car had triggered a repo warning. And worst of all, she had less than $30 left to feed the kids for the week. "I'm so tired," Lena whispered. "I don't know how you do it." Maya closed her eyes. She remembered that feeling. She still felt it, some days. That raw desperation, the tightness in the chest, the shame in asking, the cold fear of not enough. She took a breath, then opened her notebook to the emergency strategy page. "How I do it. I plan. I forgive myself. I track every cent. And I keep going." But what she said out loud was, "I'm here, and we're going to figure this out together." She didn't offer a solution right away. She listened. She let Lena talk. Let the pain unravel. Let the fears come out in long, shaking waves. When the silence came, Maya gently said, "I have $100 I can send tonight." Lena's breath hitched. "No strings. You don't owe me. But if you're willing, I can also help you build what I did." That night, Maya created a care package with her hands and her heart. Inside, $100 cash transfer. A fresh notebook she bought last week, just in case. A handwritten letter, folded inside page 1. "You are not broken. The system is. But you can still build something beautiful." A copy of her envelope system, color-coded. One $5 bill, slipped into the envelope labeled "Me." And at the bottom of the box, a sticky note that read, "Day 1. Begin again." 2 days later, Lena called again. "I cried when I opened it," she said. "I didn't realize I needed permission to start small." Maya smiled. We all do. Lena had always been the strong one growing up. The protector. The one who made sure Maya had dinner even when there wasn't much food left. And now, their roles had quietly shifted. Not into a hierarchy, but a partnership. Sisterhood. Rebuilt through budgeting, trust, and grace. Over the next month, Lena sent Maya photos. A page from her notebook. In. $620 out. $588. A sticky note labeled Joy Fund. $3 so far. Her kids helping make rice and beans. Budget chefs at work. Every image made Maya's heart swell. Because the tools she had used to survive were now tools to uplift others. She wrote in her $5 book that night, "Legacy isn't just what we leave. It's what we teach. If I can help my sister stand taller, then this is more than budgeting. This is healing. This is repair. This is revolution." A week later, Lena called again, this time laughing. I made a rule like yours. No spending unless it's in the book. The kids tried to sneak candy into the cart, and I made them write it down. Maya laughed so hard she snorted. They're going to grow up with notebooks and envelopes and more peace than we ever had, Lena said. Maya wiped tears from her eyes. Good, she said. That's exactly what they deserve. And that night, she added a new envelope to her system, labeled in green marker. Family Fund. Because the system she had built for herself, it was strong enough now to hold others. And that, to her, was the truest form of wealth. It had sat in her drawer for almost 7 months, tucked beneath all the others, beneath emergency, future Maya, joy, investing, family fund. A plain, unassuming white envelope, uncreased, unbent, still sealed. The handwriting on it was hers, but more hesitant than usual. It read, Grief. Maya had made it one night after watching an old home video her mother had sent. Her father's voice was in the background, that soft, gravelly tone she hadn't heard in person in nearly 3 years. The sound had hit her like a stone to the ribs. She remembered how quickly the tears came, how she'd clutch her chest like her body didn't know what to do with the ache. After the crying stopped, she opened her notebook. She wrote, I need a plan for grief. I need a budget for it, not avoid it. And so, she made the envelope, but she never used it. Month after month, as she filled her other envelopes, she would see it, staring up at her, quiet and patient. She never opened it, never added to it, but she never threw it away either. And that meant something, because in a life filled with loud survival, it was easy to pretend sadness didn't need space. But Maya had learned something in the silence. Everything that costs energy costs money, even heartbreak. Then came the day it needed to be opened. It was a Sunday morning. She woke up to a missed call from her cousin, Lena's side. A voice message waited, trembling, distant, full of apology. Their grandmother had passed away in her sleep. 91. Peaceful, but gone. Maya sat on the edge of her bed in silence, phone still in hand. And for once, she didn't panic. She didn't collapse under the weight of another "what now?" Instead, she stood up, walked to the drawer, and pulled out the sealed envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, 3 $20 bills and one handwritten note. For the days that hurt, for the train ride home, for the flowers you deserve to leave behind. She used it exactly how she'd imagined. She bought a round-trip bus ticket back to her hometown, an 8-hour ride each way. She brought a book, a sandwich, and her joy envelope, just in case. She sat by the window, watching the world blur by, and whispered memories to herself like lullabies. Her grandmother's home still smelled like eucalyptus and lemon soap. The air was thick with family, stories, food, and grief. Maya stood next to Lena, holding her niece's tiny hand, listening to relatives talk about life and loss and legacy. She didn't feel out of place. She didn't feel small. She felt present. Because this time, grief didn't come with financial shame. She had budgeted for it. After the service, Maya left a bouquet of fresh daisies on her grandmother's windowsill. Yellow, her favorite, paid for with cash from the grief envelope. Not because flowers fix things, but because dignity matters, even in mourning, especially in mourning. When she got back to her apartment, Maya opened her notebook. On a clean page, she wrote. The envelope was small, but was enough. I didn't cry over the cost. I cried because I missed her. Grief needs space, and space costs money, and that's okay. I budgeted for sadness, and I am proud of that. Then, without hesitation, she made a new envelope. She labeled it Healing and added $5. Not because she needed it now, but because someday she would. And next time, she wanted to be ready. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon, buried under junk mail and fast food coupons. Maya didn't recognize the return address, just a bland corporate envelope with her name typed neatly across the front. For a second, she almost threw it out, but something made her pause. She slid it open with the dull edge of a pen and pulled out the letter inside. It was real, official, cold fonts, business margins, and just a hint of good news trying to break through the formality. Congratulations. You've been approved for a secure credit card. Maya stood in the kitchen, letter in hand, eyes scanning the words again and again. She had applied months ago, back when her score still carried the sting of shame. She'd scraped together a $200 deposit and mailed it in with trembling hands. Then forgot about it, told herself not to get her hopes up. And now they were saying yes. Her eyes drifted to the number near the bottom of the page. Credit limit, $250. APR, 21.99%. Credit Bureau reporting, yes, monthly. To anyone else, it might have looked unimpressive. To Maya, it looked like a door. She grabbed her notebook and opened to the credit climb page. Her fingers hovered, then moved with purpose. Week 28, approved. Secure card opened. Limit, $250. Usage rule, only groceries under $50. Pay in full every month. No exceptions. Track every swipe. She circled the word pay 3 times. Drew a heart next to it. Because this wasn't debt. This was strategy. That weekend, she went grocery shopping with a list in hand and the new card tucked neatly into a separate pocket in her wallet. Her heart pounded at checkout. Even though she had the money, even though the purchase was planned, the moment she pulled out the card, a flicker of fear rose in her throat. Not panic. Memory. Of overdrafts. Of declined swipes. Of judgmental looks. But this time the card cleared. No bounce. No shame. Just a beep. And a receipt for $42.13. She smiled, folded the paper neatly, and slid in her notebook between the pages labeled food and credit log. By the time her statement arrived 3 weeks later, Maya was ready. She paid it in full, down to the penny. No interest. No delay. No stress. And when the confirmation email came through, she whispered out loud to the empty room, I did that. Me. At week 32, she checked her credit score again. 548. Not dramatic, but higher. Higher than the 513 she'd started with. Higher than the years of silence and avoidance. She logged it carefully, drew a tiny graph, and wrote, upward is upward. Period. Around that same time, she received another letter in the mail. This one was less corporate. It was handwritten. The return address, her old apartment complex. She blinked. Opened it slowly. Inside, a $78 refund check. Security deposit overpayment. She laughed out loud. A year ago, she would have torn that open in desperate relief. Now, she smiled and added the check to her investing envelope. Later that night, she wrote a new affirmation in the $5 book. The system didn't break me. I cracked it. I'm not a cautionary tale. I am a case study in what's possible with patience. Credit didn't make me whole, but learning to face it made me brave. She took a walk around the block, past the corner store where she used to wonder if she had enough to cover a $6 meal, past the bus stop that had held so many 5 a.m. starts. And when she got home, she sat down with her notebook, flipped to the back, and wrote on a blank page. Goal, 620 by next year. Why? To prove I can. To unlock better rent options. To teach others it's never too late. This isn't about numbers. It's about dignity. She tucked the letter into her milestone folder. One day, she would look back on this as a beginning, not of wealth, but of access, and control, and healing. And she'd remember what it felt like to hold something in her hand that once seemed impossible. Approval. She almost didn't apply. The job post sat open on her screen for 3 days. Maya kept rereading it between shifts, scrolling to the bottom and hovering over the Apply Now button like it was made of fire. Administrative assistant, nonprofit advocacy office, full-time, weekends off, health benefits, starting at $19 per hour. It sounded impossible, too professional, too clean, too much of everything she used to think she couldn't have. She didn't have a degree. Her resume was patched together with retail jobs, clerical shifts, and side hustles. But one line in the listing pulled at her, seeking someone with strong organization and time management skills. And Maya thought her notebook. The columns, the trackers, the envelopes, the system she had built from the ground up with nothing but survival instincts and stubborn grace. She clicked apply. 2 weeks later, the email came. We'd love to schedule an interview. Her chest tightened, not with fear, with a quiet, trembling thrill she hadn't felt in years. Not dread, hope. She didn't have a blazer, but she had a clean, black dress, the thrifted one with the tiny red flowers. She'd ironed it the night before, laid it on the chair like armor. She spent the morning before the interview rereading her resume, practicing answers, rehearsing how to talk about her strengths without apologizing for them. She wrote a page in her $5 book titled, What I Bring: Budgeting Systems from Scratch. Time Blocking Master. Problem Solver Under Pressure. Empathy plus Communication. Real-life resource management expert. And below it, I've run my life like a business with zero funding and 100% accountability. That's value. The office was on the second floor of a modest brick building near downtown. She arrived 10 minutes early, checked her reflection in the window, straightened her shoulders, walked in. The panel was 3 people. Casual. Warm. They asked about her experience handling schedules, coordinating logistics, staying organized. She told them about the store, how she kept track of rotating shifts, managed inventory, balanced opening and closing under tight time frames. They asked, how do you manage competing tasks? She smiled. I budget my time like I budget my money. I assign everything a category and a priority. I don't guess, I track. They blinked, nodded. It wasn't corporate speak, but it was true. At the end, one of them asked, what's your proudest accomplishment in the last year? Maya paused. Then she said, slowly, I saved my first $1,000, paid off old debt, raised my credit score by 40 points, and I taught 2 other people how to do the same. Silence. Then, that's impressive. She left the interview feeling like she had just arrived somewhere, like she'd been invisible for so long, and now, the world was finally seeing her shape. 3 days later, the phone rang. We'd love to offer you the position. She sat down on the edge of the tub, legs trembling. $19 per hour, 40 hours per week. Benefits, PTO, a real desk, weekends off. She whispered, thank you, and hung up. Then she screamed, just once, a loud, gasping, joy-soaked scream that filled the apartment like light. Then she cried, not out of fear, not out of stress, out of relief, because this was the moment every envelope, every notebook page, every skipped latte had been leading toward. She didn't go out to celebrate. She stayed in, cooked her favorite budget meal, rice, black beans, sweet peppers sautéed with garlic, poured herself a glass of water in her favorite chipped mug, and while she ate, she opened her notebook to a new section. At the top, she wrote, Income Shift Plan, New Job, Take-Home Estimate, $2,600 per month. Budget Plan, 50% needs, 30% savings/debt, 20% joy plus future. She drew a small star in the corner, labeled it, First Time Planning Abundance. Later that night, she made one final entry in her $5 book. I interviewed for a job I once thought was out of reach. I spoke clearly. I showed up whole. I deserved that call back. And I said yes. She opened her drawer, shuffled through the envelopes, and pulled out Freedom Fund. Then, with her black ink pen, she added another envelope. Growth. Because she wasn't just maintaining anymore. She was evolving. And that evolution, it came not from perfection, but from persistence and belief. And one notebook that held the blueprint of a woman rewriting her story from the inside out. The idea came from Kayla. They were sitting in the park after a long week, paper coffee cups in hand, notebooks splayed across the grass like chapters in a novel no one else could read. Kayla had started journaling, really journaling, not just budgeting notes or debt tracking, but feelings, dreams, fears. It helped her sleep, she said. You should try it, Kayla said, nudging Maya's arm. Write a letter to your past self, like from you now. You'd be surprised what you need to hear. Maya chuckled. That sounds intense. But later that night, after dinner, she sat on the couch, notebook in her lap, pen hovering. And slowly, gently, she began to write. Dear me, the version of you who had $42 and a half-empty fridge. The one who cried on the kitchen floor after a 12-hour shift. The one who thought budgeting was just a word rich people use to make poor people feel worse. You're not weak. You're just tired. And you're allowed to be. But I want you to know, there's a future waiting where things don't feel so impossible. The words came slowly at first, then in a steady stream. Her hand trembled as she wrote. She didn't censor the pain. She didn't skip the days she'd hated herself. The moments of regret. The panic attacks. The way she used to flinch when her card got declined or when her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. She remembered it all. But she remembered something else too. She kept going. You're going to build a system with paper and pen. You're going to survive off rice and lentils, and somehow still manage to feel proud of it. You're going to save $5 at a time until you hit 4 digits, and cry happy tears when you do. You'll teach others. You'll speak on a stage. You'll get a job that doesn't drain you. And one day, you'll buy flowers just because you want to. Not because you forgot pain, but because you learned how to honor it without letting it own you. She paused and took a deep breath. Tears were sliding down her cheeks now, but she didn't stop. You will no longer feel like money is a monster under the bed. You will make peace with your past. You will forgive yourself for what you didn't know. And you will become the kind of woman you once thought only existed in books and podcasts and daydreams. You'll be you, just stronger, softer, smarter. Maya set her pen down and read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it into a fresh envelope. She labeled it, "For the days I forget," because even now, even with a new job, even with growing savings, even with a credit score on the rise, there were still days when doubt knocked. And she needed to be reminded. She had already survived the hardest parts. That weekend, she created a new section in her notebook. Letters to me. Not budget notes. Not receipts. Not strategies. Just truths. She wrote one for the Maya who didn't ask for help. One for the Maya who took her first bus ride to work in the rain. One for the Maya who stayed in instead of ordering takeout and called it victory. One for the Maya who walked away from an online sale because a dream cost more. Every letter was short, unpolished, kind, and each ended the same way. You are not behind. You are on your way. Later that night, she lit a candle, curled in her blanket, and smiled as she flipped through her envelopes. They were full, not all of them with money, but with meaning, joy, emergency, investing, grief, growth, freedom, and now, memory. A place to store not just cash, but reminders. Because budgets weren't just about dollars. They were about who you became in the process. It was a quiet Sunday morning. No alarms. No deadlines. No pressure. The kind of morning Maya once thought only belonged to people who didn't live paycheck to paycheck. The sun filtered through the blinds in soft golden lines. Her apartment smelled like warm oats and cinnamon. A budget-friendly breakfast she'd mastered months ago. She stepped out of the shower, wrapped herself in a towel, and wiped the fog from the bathroom mirror. And there she was, her reflection. Still Maya, but not the same Maya who once avoided mirrors like unpaid bills. This Maya stood still, looked herself in the eye, and didn't flinch. Her skin was still dry in some places. Her curls needed trimming. The circles under her eyes hadn't disappeared completely, but she looked grounded, present, not performing, not pretending, just real. And for the first time in a long, long time, the woman in the mirror didn't look like she was bracing for bad news. She looked ready. Maya opened the medicine cabinet, reached for her moisturizer, something she'd almost given up on last year because it felt like a luxury. But now she budgeted for it, because budgeting wasn't about punishment anymore. It was care. She massaged it in her face slowly, like a ritual, like a quiet reminder that she was worthy of softness. She didn't need to hustle every second. She didn't need to deserve rest or joy or comfort. She was allowed to tend to herself. She stood in front of the mirror a little longer, watching the steam fade from the corners of the glass. And suddenly, the past came into focus. The Maya who had once curled into a ball on her kitchen floor, unable to breathe. The Maya who couldn't afford bus fare and walked in the rain with aching feet. The Maya who skipped meals so her phone wouldn't get shut off. The Maya who stared into an empty fridge and made a plan anyway. That Maya, she was still here, but she wasn't suffering anymore. She was surviving, thriving, becoming. She turned to the mirror and whispered, "I'm proud of you." Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. 3 words she had never said to herself out loud before. 3 words she now believed. Later that day, she wrote in her $5 book, "My mirror used to feel like a punishment. Now it's a place I meet my own progress. I see a woman with less panic in her jaw, less tension in her shoulders, more breath. I see someone who no longer thinks survival is her only story. I see someone becoming whole." She spent the rest of the day tending to her space. She swept, watered her little window plant, made a batch of lentils, reorganized her envelopes, added $20 to investing, updated her credit score log, 556 now. She listened to soft music, lit the lavender candle she'd saved for Sundays. And when evening came, she opened her notebook and titled the next page, "How I Know I've Grown." And she wrote, "I don't dread checking my bank account. I say no without guilt. I take naps without panic. I smile at the woman in the mirror. I don't fear the first of the month. I choose my life, even when it's hard." That night, she stood in front of the mirror again, brushed her teeth, tied her hair up, and gave herself one final nod. Not to be polite, to acknowledge herself, to say, "I see you." Not just the budgeter, not just the sister, not just the woman who figured out, but the version of Maya who finally believed she had value, even if no one else was watching. Because dignity is quiet, but it's visible. And tonight, it looked back at her in the mirror with soft eyes and an open heart. It was payday, but for the first time in Maya's adult life, it didn't feel like a rescue. She woke up before her alarm, sunlight stretching across her bed sheets. And instead of reaching for her phone to check her bank balance in a panic, she walked into her kitchen and made breakfast. Oats, banana, cinnamon, her usual. She sat at the table, took a bite, smiled. Because today, she wasn't waiting for the deposit to save her. She was ready for it. The balance was already there. Emergency fund intact, bills paid ahead, envelopes funded, groceries prepped for the week. Her credit score was climbing, her debt shrinking, her notebooks full. This paycheck, it wasn't her parachute. It was her fuel. She logged into her banking app anyway, just to see it. The number, $2,918.22. A combination of her new full-time paycheck, a small freelance project she took on the side, and her tax refund, split across accounts with surgical precision. She blinked at it, not in disbelief, but in gratitude. She grabbed her pen and opened her newest notebook, Volume 4. She'd labeled it because she'd filled 3 already. At the top of the page, Week 40, the balance tips. She allocated every dollar with care. $500 to rent, paid early, again. $200 to groceries and home supplies. $300 to emergency. $250 to future Maya. $100 to investing. $40 to joy. $100 to family fund. $50 to grief and healing. $40 to transportation. $30 to giving. $30 to freedom fund. $20 to a brand new envelope. Give without asking. She'd been waiting to make that one. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was honor. A fund for showing up quietly when someone else felt like she once did. That afternoon, she walked to the post office and mailed a letter to her cousin, along with a prepaid grocery card anonymously. She didn't need to be thanked, because she remembered, and remembering meant giving back. Later that day, she opened the folder where she kept her original breaking point page, the one from the fridge and mustard night. The columns were shaky, the handwriting tense, the fear still visible between the lines. And she cried, not with grief, with pride. She had tracked every single week since then. 40 weeks of choices, 40 weeks of healing, 40 weeks of change. She picked up her phone and opened a budgeting app she now used occasionally to supplement her notebook. She typed in the last few entries, ran the tracker, and saw a new number. Net worth, plus $1, 112.49. She whispered, "What?" Then laughed. Laughed loud, not at the number itself, but at the meaning of it. She wasn't in the red anymore. She was net positive. For the first time since she could remember, the balance had tipped. She wasn't clawing her way out. She was standing on stable ground. That evening, she bought herself a small bouquet. Not daisies this time, sunflowers. Bright, bold, standing tall. She placed them in a jar on her windowsill, beside a candle she lit just for her. Then she opened the $5 book, now nearly full, and wrote the final entry on the last page. It took less than a year to go from panic to peace, from drowning to designed, from broke to balanced. Not because I earned more at first, but because I believed I deserved more. And now I live like it. This notebook began with fear. It ends with freedom. She closed the book, tied a ribbon around it, labeled the cover in her neatest handwriting. How to Budget When You're Broke, Maya's Way. And she placed it on the shelf beside her other volumes, next to the envelopes, next to the flowers, next to her new life. That night, she didn't dream of riches or mansions. She dreamed of enough, of passing down notebooks, of other women writing their first page. And in her dream, someone whispered, "You're no longer budgeting to survive. You're budgeting to build." And that was everything. Maya's story wasn't one of sudden windfalls or overnight success. She didn't win the lottery. She didn't go viral. She didn't marry into wealth or stumble upon a secret formula. She just started with a pen, a notebook, and the quiet decision to stop surviving and start designing. She didn't wait for perfect conditions. She made progress with mismatched socks, dollar store candles, and dinner made of rice and quiet pride. She budgeted through grief, sickness, exhaustion, and doubt. She taught herself how to rest, how to say no, how to grow her life, not in leaps, but in layers. And slowly, gently, her story changed shape. She became someone who made space for joy, someone who planned for generosity, someone who stood on stages, walked into interviews with her head high, helped her sister start again, sent anonymous grocery cards to women she'd never meet. She didn't escape poverty. She rewrote her relationship to it. She didn't just raise her credit score. She raised her standards. She didn't just track her money. She tracked her becoming. Now, Maya keeps her first notebook in a box under her bed, not to forget where she started, but to remember what's possible. Because some of the most powerful financial transformations start with $5 and a decision. So if you're sitting in your kitchen today, staring at an empty fridge or a mountain of bills, if you're wondering if budgeting will ever be enough, if you feel like you've already failed too many times, here's what Maya would say. Begin anyway. Open the notebook. Write it down. All of it. You don't need more money to start. You just need more honesty. And one quiet rule. Track everything, forgive often, and keep going. Because your story, it's not over. Not even close. And the life you want to build, it might begin with the next page. This was Maya's story, but it could be anyone's. Even yours. Especially yours.